Greetings, collectors. I'm Ryan the Cyber Hobbit.
And it's time for a Masters Collection unboxing.
This is the Dead Marshes Masters Collection by Weta Workshop. This is a 1/6 scale depiction of the very ethereal scene in The Lord of the Rings, The Two Towers, where Frodo falls into the water and is saved by Gollum.
Don't follow the lights.
This is my first Masters Collection piece, and I'm extremely excited about it. Weta creates only one Masters Collection piece per year, and this year they went with something extremely bold. This may be their most ambitious statue of all time, as not only does it capture what's above the surface, but the ethereal underwater darkness below. There's something about a statue coming with its own set of gloves that helps to really build up the anticipation. I made a video about 8 months ago when this piece was first revealed, and I remember being very impressed with just how daring it was for Weta to undertake such an intricate piece. When you think of the Dead Marshes, typically you think of the vast and swampy plain, but like I said before, this prominently features a reimagining of what took place underwater. Also included in the box was the sealed envelope that contained a certificate of authenticity, as well as a beautiful limited edition art piece of the Dead Marshes as well. Really cool. Since the statue comes with over 30 pieces and 5 characters, I'll be assembling it as we go along and stop to highlight each character. But first, let's start with the base. So the backbone of the statue is this twisted, decaying, and dead tree that starts at the base and extends up through a layer of water into the open air. The sculpting of the tree looks well done and has a sickly shade of green and gray paint job. At the top is the murky layer of water and a large section of the swamp filled with all types of aquatic weeds, moss, and algae. You also see many holes here that later we'll add some frond-like grassy plants into. The little splash in the water is the place that Gollum will be reaching into. There's also a couple things hidden here that I didn't notice until later when I was adding the grass. See if you can take a guess before we get there. In traditional Weta fashion, the base has a section of the map of Middle-earth debossed into it. Also on the base is a little USB-C plug and button that will power and control all the hidden LEDs throughout the base. There are 3 branches that need to be attached here. And although they all use magnets, this one branch in particular is much more loose than I would prefer, especially since it's actually breaking out of the base and sits on the edge. If ever I need to move this statue, I will probably remove that branch first to allow for a better grip. The last branch is also a bit loose, but since it's more towards the middle, it has less of a chance to come apart. Now on to our first of the greenish disembodied spirit, Lights of the Dead. There are 4 parts to this one: his body, his head, an arm, and a piece of hair. I think the sculpt of his face is really well done. A pale and distorted face with blank eyes and an open mouth. That black tongue is gnarly too. He's got an algae or a type of seaweed tangled in his hair. Also, some is draped on the clothing of his body. His arms and hands are also sculpted and painted well. I really like the transition from his clothing to the ethereal-like tendrils. A greenish, semi-transparent, flowy hair is very well done. I know it looks rather fragile, but the hair is actually not polystone, so it has a fair bit of give to it and can bend just slightly. Overall, for a ghastly spirit of the dead, this looks great. The key on his back is a metal prod and slots into the designated spot on the black base. There's one more of the lights of the dead, though this time only half a body. It's pretty much the same story, a haunting looking face, tangled with seaweed and fluid like ethereal hair. Really well done. He's got two separate hands this time, and although it's tempting to put them both on, for right now, and for the ease of setting it up, it's best to leave his left hand off until later. He's got a big keyhole on his back, and slots into the key that's on the tree with a pretty strong magnet. And now for the ring bearer Frodo. The accuracy to Elijah Wood is actually pretty great. It's not perfect, but I can clearly see him in there. What I think this does a great job at is making it look like he's underwater. Something about the slightest tint of green in the paint application and texture to his skin just makes it seem almost, dare I say, more accurate than how it looked in the films. I'm not sure how the scene was filmed, but besides his hair, his face never really came across to me like he was actually underwater. His hair is sculpted well, nice and wavy with the same bits of green you can find all over the rest of him. Plenty of texture on the fabric to his clothing. All the layers are there, and again the same green tinting. His Lorien cloak looks great. Plenty of wrinkles, and it's spread out to simulate he's underwater. I love that they still managed to get this pattern on there too. They also did a great job hiding all the small holes that will later attach some sculpted bubbles to him. I bet you haven't seen one yet. And of course, his hairy hobbit feet. I know he's underwater, but I do think perhaps their hair should be painted slightly darker. It doesn't really seem to have that much of a difference color-wise when compared to his skin. I wonder if they forgot to paint this part. His sword's sting and scabbard come separate. Again, a murky type paint job to help indicate being underwater. Not much to it, but it looks good. Unfortunately, how it attaches isn't so good. I'm not sure if they are relying on magnets here, or it just being a tight fit, but it does seem to detach rather easy. It does stay if you stop touching it, but you have to find a good angle. Once his sword is in place, you can finally attach him to the base. This part was definitely the most frustrating to do. It's not hard, but it does take a good amount of time to find just the right angle to find the keyhole. And once he's in place, you can finally add the other hand of the wraith that's just above him. Next, there's just a few more of these ethereal-like tendril things to add, and then we can move to above the surface. This smaller one has a pretty weak magnet, but it does stay. Again, just put it in and then don't touch it. Next up, we'll take a look at Gollum. The head sculpt is pretty good, maybe not Weta's best, though I think it's good enough for this scene. From certain angles, especially at the sides, it's spot on to how he looked in the films. Perhaps he's a bit angrier looking than I would like for this scene in particular, but again I think it works. I do though prefer the face and color saturation on the 1/6 scale Enraged Golem Weta released a while back. I think the hair on this version is an improvement though. A bit thinner and not as standout. His body is as you would expect, all malnourished with visible ribs and hip bones poking out. I also like the fact that on this version you can see he has his scars from being tortured. Enraged Golem is from The Hobbit, so this is actually pre-tortured, but again, I much prefer the paint application on that version. This one seems to be missing the tiny skin freckles that made the Enraged Golem look more lifelike. His feet and knees are properly dirty from crawling around on the ground all the time. And the sculpt of his loincloth looks good, all tattered and dirty. And I always really like the fact that Gollum has his little pocket there and ready should he ever get the ring back. Gollum's hand comes separate because you attach that from under the water. That's also why it has a slight greener hue to it. To set him up on the base, start by poking his arm through the water, and then his feet into the keyholes. Then it's just a matter of putting his hand on from the underside. Now on to our final character, Samwise. The head sculpt is okay, probably the weaker of the three, but it's not bad. From certain angles you can definitely see Sean Astin, but then from other angles, not so much. All that being said, he's actually my favorite of the three because of the rest of him. His clothing and accessories are extremely well done. Starting from his elven brooch all the way down to his hairy feet, the details are amazing. Each piece of clothing has a different visible fabric texture and the paint application is spot on. I really like the sculpt of his buttons and belt, and even his little sword has plenty of details. Very dirty and hairy feet, though again I wish they were a bit more brown. I think my favorite part is his little backpack with all the pots and pans and bedding attached. Speaking of pots, there's another part you need to attach, and it's his little iron campfire pot. I believe the attaching point is held on with friction instead of a magnet, which as a result makes it a bit looser than I would like, but I guess it fits the theme of this entire statue as fragile. Also a lovely job on the weathering at the bottom of his cloak. Very accurate and dirty. He slots in very easy and, unlike some other parts, feels very secure. Next at the top is the other half of the twisted, white, and rotting dead tree. It seems like it doesn't use a magnet and instead relies on its weight to hold it down. I wish it had a magnet, but either way it looks great. Now it might seem like we're done, but there's actually still quite a number of things that still need to be added. Inside the top layer of the box, there's a lot of feather reed grass as well as some bubbles we'll attach to Frodo. To set up the grass, there are 3 different sizes that all have a color code on the bottom that match the holes you'll find all over the base. Since I've been setting up this statue on a pretty tall barrel table, it wasn't until I got a bit higher that I noticed something really cool that I missed earlier. Hidden inside 2 of the little puddles of water on the sides are the faces of the dead. It's kinda hard to focus on them through the murky water, but how cool is that? Since the holes for the grass are a bit deep, you'll need some overhead lights to see the colors. Unfortunately, all the grass is held on with slight friction and its own weight instead of magnets, and some of them are much more loose than others. It almost seems like they could blow away with just a gentle breeze. Luckily, I'll never have this statue outside, so I guess I'm safe. Next are the bubbles. They might all look different with how I'm holding them here, but there are actually 3 different styles, and they slot into the hidden holes all over Frodo. And yes, that means you'll have to remove Frodo to do it. The holes are hidden extremely well, but with some patience, I eventually found them. Here's the order that the bubbles should go. And finally the last step, attaching the one ring. It's very small and I almost missed it when I was taking things out of the box. It's very delicate, but surprisingly stands up pretty well. Once Frodo is put back in place, the hands of the Wraith reattached, the only thing left is to plug in the cord for the LEDs. I'm a bit disappointed that the cord they give you is only 3 feet long, and they don't include a power adapter, though I guess they'd have to ship multiple types for that. Either way, when I finally turned on the LEDs, I took a step back and marveled. It's amazing what a little lighting can do. It really helps to bring it to life. This statue is simply incredible. A very ambitious piece that ultimately I think was successful. My really only true gripe is that it's extremely fragile. More than just a couple of things are pretty loose. Maybe it has a couple of paint flaws, but I don't think those are enough to hold back just how amazing this is. The sculpt is very bold, and it's clear a lot of time was put into figuring out how everything would work together. I don't think there will ever be another piece quite like this. I give this Masters Collection statue a 9.5 out of 10. Simply breathtaking. If you enjoyed this video, hit that like button or consider subscribing. Until next time, thank you for watching. Bye bye.